For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and on our weekly flagship show, The Talking Point, today we're discussing the India-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Our expert this evening from Canberra is the Indian High Commissioner to Australia, Ambassador Manpreet. Vohra. Ambassador Vohra, great to see you, sir.
Likewise. Thank you, Amitabh.
Ambassador, very comprehensive strategic partnership which was elevated in 2020, but just wanted to talk about one of the main pillars, which is, of course, defense. And this week we've seen, a gaining of momentum of sorts. The indications were there when the Prime Ministers had the summit of joint surveillance and reconnaissance. But the PAI in Darwin, is that a clear message being sent to an aggressive China?
Well, no, I wouldn't say it's a message being sent to anyone. It is just doing what we think we need to do to make sure that our defense is in good hands, in good shape. And therefore, we are simply doing the kind of surveillance that we need to do, our Navy needs to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a message to anyone.
Right, but there is a lot of comprehensive defense engagement. I mean, we have a mutual logistics arrangement. I think the Deputy Chief of Naval Staff Australian is also visiting India. They've been in joint exercises, Australia with Malabar. So a whole plethora of activity on that front.
Well, that is true. We've been actively engaged with Australia on these matters for some time now, and things have stepped up in recent years. Australia's re-entry into the Malabar exercises, bilateral exercises we do, other multilateral exercises that we do. So there is a degree of defense cooperation that is increasing for sure, and that is because we feel that it is in our mutual interest. We must increase our interoperability. We must be able to leverage our otherwise very good ties in other spheres that concern both of us. We are like-minded. We are in a common neighborhood. We do have common strategic challenges. We also have shared objectives which we want to pursue. And therefore, it makes sense for India and Australia to cooperate even more.
There's cooperation not just bilaterally, but multilaterally in the Quad as well, Ambassador. Some reports now suggesting again that Japan may be invited to join AUKUS. Leaders in AUKUS, of course, have talked about things like hypersonic technologies. With bilateral ties with Australia, India being in the Quad, can there be any similar benefits for India when it's technologies of this sort, hypersonic or even nuclear-powered submarines?
Well, the Quad is not a defense arrangement, as you know. The Quad, we happen to be some members of AUKUS. At least two of them at the moment happen to be members of Quad. Japan is a member of Quad. So are we. But the Quad is not a defense arrangement. It's certainly, it doesn't have any military dimension. The Quad is engaged on other pillars that have been decided by the leaders on what they would go for. If AUKUS or getting Japan into AUKUS makes sense to the other partners of AUKUS, that is for them really. I don't think India subscribes or any of the Quad partners subscribes to the Quad being anything militaristic.
But any movement, Ambassador, in terms of high tech, whether it's bilaterally or multilaterally for India?
Well, indeed, that is something that one is always looking out for. Whatever high tech, whether it be equipment, whether it be technologies, whether it be force multipliers, those are natural requirements of any armed forces, including ours, and we try to get them from wherever we can. And if partnership with Australia, with Australian companies, with their research organizations promises something that is good for us, then why not?
In terms of India's foreign policy, India has set its sights firmly on its interests, its own interests when it comes to, say, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and has been made clear on various platforms, including the 2+2 and with President Biden that Prime Minister Modi had. What's the sense in Australia? Because, after the Prime Ministerial Summit, there seemed to be at least an understanding of India's sensitivities, more so in Australia or, say, in Japan.
Well, the understanding of India's position has been there for, well, ever since the conflict broke out in Europe. That is the beauty of being good friends, of being close friends, that you understand each other's points of views, your perspectives, you even understand another friend's constraints. And Australia has been quite clear and quite public about its clarity that they understand India's positions, India's priorities.
One of the crucial pillars of India-Australia bilateral relations was signed virtually. You've played host to a Commerce and Industry Minister, Piyush Goyal, as well. The IndAus ECTA. Now, it has been in negotiation for over a decade, and then there was a sprint towards the signing of the ECTA. Very crucial element, Ambassador?
Well, in a sense, I wouldn't really say that it's been in negotiation for 10 years
Well,
or more.
Started.
It started and then it got subsumed into the larger negotiations of RCEP, during which both India and Australia were a part. And therefore, the bilateral space took a bit of a backseat. But our real negotiations began literally 6 months ago. And to be perfectly honest with you, our actual negotiations are really getting down, sinking your teeth into it, really began on the 4th of January. So we've achieved the IndAus ECTA in literally about 90 days, to be honest. And that is superb progress. I've been part of some attempts at free trade agreements with other countries. And it's unheard of that you can actually begin negotiations and conclude them in such a short span of time. This might actually be setting some sort of a record. And the reason is, apart from the fact that we are very close together, the realization, I think, on both sides that to negotiate a free trade agreement requires mutual give and take. It requires both sides to feel that there is something in it for them. If you try a largely one-sided agreement, the other side is not going to really accept it. Like, for example, our concerns were not being met during the RCEP negotiations, and we had to walk away. But now, with this realization, with our close friendship, with also the new geopolitics, the new geostrategy, geoeconomics, the vulnerabilities that have been exposed in the last couple of years thanks to the pandemic, there is this realization that countries such as India and Australia must leverage their very good relationship. We must leverage the complementarity of our economies. Australia must leverage India as the fastest growing large economy. India must leverage Australia as an extremely prosperous and doing very well, amongst the fastest growing OECD countries at the moment. And all of these meant that you actually could have a successful negotiation and deal, which is what happened.
One of the realizations, as you mentioned, geoeconomics, geostrategy, geopolitics, would also have been, China's aggressive behavior when it comes to Australia on trade, and India also trying to diversify its supply chain.
Yeah, well, not consciously, but otherwise, I think the vulnerabilities of supply chains, the realization that over dependence on any single market or any single source of supply is not conducive to long-term economic security, and therefore one must diversify all of that and find new partners, not necessarily alternate partners, but certainly new partners, new markets, and therefore, yes, that does play a role.
If you would like to expand a little bit more on some of the crucial elements in ECTA, Ambassador, I mean, when you're talking about zero tariffs or critical minerals or investment funds, because when you talk about FTAs, you can say goods, services, yes, but here you're even including taxation.
Yeah. This is a much broader agreement. Loosely these agreements are known as FTAs or free trade agreements, but it goes much beyond that. It's not just about reducing tariffs or eliminating tariffs. That is one major part of this ECTA, of course. Australia has removed tariffs on all our goods, almost all our goods, and the rest of them within the next few years. We've eliminated tariffs on 85% of Australia's trade with India, and more will follow. So that's one aspect of it. Then we have interesting elements of the ECTA, which includes mobility partnership, migration, which includes new visa categories, which includes mutual recognition of academic qualifications. So it goes way beyond that. Taxation, there is an issue of the double taxation avoidance agreement, one part of that creating some problems. And under this ECTA, we've decided that that will also be resolved simultaneously with the entry into force of this agreement. So it's a very, very broad agreement, much broader than an FTA.
I Commissioner, and a lot of interest about the visa regime that you are mentioning, whether it's for professionals, whether it's for students. If you want to just expand a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, so for students, this agreement gives to our students here post-study work rights, as it's called. So depending on the course they're doing, the manner of course they are doing, the length of the course they are doing, they would be able to stay in Australia beyond their course to work and gain international work experience for anything from 18 months to 4 years. So that is very obviously very attractive to Indian students who might wish to come to Australia, because besides getting their education, it guarantees them the ability to get at least some work experience as well.
Commissioner, again, the sensitive areas we know politically, domestically, on both sides, agriculture, say dairy, meat products for Australian exports to India. But is there movement towards SECA by the end of the year? Has there been political direction being given by the Prime Minister that that's what should happen?
Well, yes, the Australian Trade Minister, and he spent a lot of time along with Minister Piyush Goyal last week. He calls this a living agreement. There is, as you know, an announcement that following the entry into force of ECTA, there would be more things that would come in, and we would try to get into a full SECA by the end of the year. We'll see how that goes, but clearly there is scope to further add on to various elements of this, bring in even newer elements beyond this. So all that is certainly possible. Agriculture, you mentioned, yes, agriculture is a sensitive subject, not just for India but also for Australia, as it is for a lot of economies. But having said that, the sensitivities are well understood and appreciated, which is why forward movement was possible. And even within that, we've been quite realistic, and aspects of agriculture or agro processing or animal husbandry, where we feel that we could today give market access to Australia. We have given that. For instance, sheep meat is a part of this. Wool is a part of this. Some amount of cotton is a part of this. Wine is a part of this. So there are several elements, even in that space. Wherever it's workable, it has been possible to agree.
Mr. Goyal, as you mentioned, he had, a plethora of meetings. It was across the board when you talk about politics. I think even shadow ministers he met. Within Australia itself, with the poll process on, is there bipartisan support for ICTA and the deal with India?
Yes, I can say that categorically, and it's very heartening to see the very, very strong bipartisan support for the larger relationship with India, but also particularly for this new agreement. Both parties, obviously, the ruling coalition is the one that has signed this agreement, and the opposition party has also lent its support to it.
And as you said, High Commissioner, in terms of the speed of this being negotiated, before this there was the FTA with the CEPA with the UAE. I do remember, I think, in one of the events with Piyush Goyal, Dan Trahan talking about his conversations with, say, the USTR or his counterparts in the UK, in Canada, with India negotiating a host of other deals. Do you think ECTA could be a template of sorts to show that this is what can be done? India is ready for business, open for business?
Well, it appears so. I mean, I can vouch for the fact that some of the countries that you mentioned have been following closely the state of our negotiations with Australia, and how and where and what contours ECTA will take. And yes, clearly, I suppose there are signals in this for other countries as well. And the most important signal, I think, is what I said earlier. If a deal can be mutually beneficial, if it is seen as a win win for both sides, it's certainly possible to conclude it.
Hi, Commissioner Ambassador Manpreet Vohra. I absolutely appreciate your time, sir, and all the best for further negotiations.
Thank you, Amitabh. Thank you very much.
The pleasure was ours. And just a reminder to our viewers to stay engaged with either this conversation or other interviews. Do put in your comments and likes and share the links for YouTube interviews. You can also follow our social media handles for the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. This is Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.